Hi there, and welcome to Pax Politica, the place where peacebuilding and visual storytelling come together. We hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. What do you remember from your your childhood with respect to the conflict? What was Colombia like back in the 90s?
I think in Bogota, we have no idea about what is conflict for real, the dimension of that. My first memory related with that was 1999. I was 10 years old, almost 11. And Jaime Garzón, the reporter, comedian, an actor, political activist, was murdered. We didn't know from who, but the hypothesis was paramilitaries with state forces in alliance. And I was a child, and he was somebody that I saw at the TV making political jokes and performing different characters. And I wanted to be an actor since then. So it was traumatic because I was confused, like why somebody like him was murdered. That doesn't make any sense because I didn't understand how somebody that did an artistic job will be killed for that. And then I study also in a high school that is by Bolivar Square in the city center.
Yeah.
So
Which one?
Colegio Mayor de San Bartolomé.
Okay.
It's in the corner.
I've seen that.
So
one, yeah.
every time that something important happened at the country or at the city, mainly, we were there. So I remember going outside after high school to protest in the Bolivar Square because he was murdered.
But then I've also heard that a lot of ex-presidents, people in the government and bureaucracy also graduated from San Bartolomeo, right? Yeah. So, like, were your school years also sort of elitist, or were you exposed to a lot of Colombia's political history because of the school you went to?
Yeah, I was for the 400 years promotion.
Okay.
So there was a lot of talking and pressure about ourselves because we were that promotion. I was the second promotion with girls. And every time they were talking about the former presidents that were studied there, and also the Jesuitas, they have some idea about education that you have to study different dimensions. So that's something that is good. So I have like social services, environmental group, scouts, travels. So different spaces beyond the normal academics where I was able to be in contact with other issues in the country, included armed conflict. We did a leadership course.
Yeah.
That was one of topics. Like now I see that in perspective, and I think it was not the more responsible thing to do, but in one of the courses, the facilitators pretend a role game with a kidnapping. Something like these kind of things to make us conscious, aware about what was happening in Colombia. But from a educational, non-more responsible way.
But I'll tell you what. So did you ever feel that the dominant narrative based on what you were learning or what you were exposed to in school was sort of supportive of what the government was telling the people? Did it include, for example, perspectives from Las FARC or other guerrilla groups as well?
I think it depends of the teachers. Like I have even the priest. I think inside the Catholic Church, in South America, we have this very right-wing trend that is dominant. And some of the priests in the high school were like that. But we have also the freedom theology, and we had priests like that in the high school too. I was not able to tell those days who was from what tendency, but now in perspective, I can see that I was exposed to both. And in my social science teachers were usually the ones that, for example, they make us make debates about topics. I remember the Iraq war. So we had to study different perspectives and then make a debate with different viewpoints. But being honest, related to our armed conflict, it was not one of the main topics. I think the dominant narrative could be seen in the fact that it was not one of the main topics. It was like a little bit hidden in terms of the dimension of what was happening in our country. It was easier to talk about another war rather than our own conflict.
So how did Jaime's murder change your perspective?
I think it's...
In fact, did Jaime's murder change your perspective at all?
Yeah, I mean, I am 36 now, and I still remember, I still cry. Last time that I was at the Memorial Center, the district one, they have a sculpture with this character that he had, the one with the shoes, El Embolador.
Okay.
And I was there and I saw it and I started to cry again because it makes me feel pain.
Why?
I think because it reminds me how Colombians are both able to create very funny and artistic and creative things or kill those things. It's like same people, same context. So I think it changed me in terms of making me more aware about that the conflict could damage people that I know, that I love, even though it was, a famous person that I never met in person. I think it's like, it's something similar with what happened in 2019, El Estallido Social. For many people, was like, this is our conflict too. This is our problem too. So I think that was the thing in my head.
In other words, after Jaime's murder, the conflict became personal for you.
Yeah, small, like the first steps to make it closer to me.
What happened after that?
I was in these leadership courses that I told you before. That was based on the spiritual exercise from San Ignacio. But just based. Because from there, they took it far.
Yeah, of course.
So it was designed from students, from forming students of this course. And it was called Curso Taller, because at the mornings, you have like theoretical things. And in the afternoons, you have workshops. So at the mornings, we work, first day was myself. Then was like group, then family, then country, South America, and the world, something like that. And we have this kind of role games. And we were like 14 years old, the first time that I went. Mm-hmm. And I questioned a lot of things there for the first time beyond it was not super rigorous.
Right.
It was a good idea took me outside high school and be there 1 week thinking in those kind of things. And one of the issues that came when we were in the Colombia Day and in the South American Day was the conflict. So it was more, I think that grew up my interest in social issues, not just conflict, but among the social issues, the conflict. And I think that led me to choose political science as a bachelor degree 3 years later.
What about your family? Like, did they feel as strongly and passionately about Jaime's murder just as much as you did?
Yeah, no, not specifically about the murder, although I think we never have spoke about it. Maybe it will be interesting to ask them. But my parents, they are both teachers.
Okay.
And they were both from the union. They met there. Especially my dad is very like left-wing, radical. My mom less, but still they were both sensitive to protest, to discuss about inequality, justice. So that was part of my influence. And also my family, my mother's family and my grandfather. He was very liberal. So we had this course at home, but no specifically related with our conflict yet.
Did you ever have heated, intense discussions about the conflict at home where people had a difference of opinion?
Not much, because we were usually agree.
Okay.
But it's more this kind of discussions where we complain about others. You know, the emotion would be related about how it's possible that the people in this country is so stupid or indifferent to injustice, to poverty. Like even at the high school, when we have this, for example, we lead a protest at the interior of the high school, and some of the parents would not agree with what we do, but my parents were agree. So with this kind of discussion.
I'm only asking you this because we're doing this recording at La Casa de la Paz, a place that was founded by a former Las FARC member. Now, it's interesting for me when you say that people in your family more or less agreed with each other when it came to understanding why the conflict in Colombia is happening in the first place. Would it then be fair to say that your family understood or at least empathized with the motives of the FARC, despite all the violence, all the attacks, all the lives lost that were taking place?
No, I think they were more, at the moment when my dad was younger, he was more closer to sympathize with M19. But I think, and I knew that because when I went then after to National University, one of the fears from them were that I might be recruited.
Yeah.
For the way I was thinking.
Of course.
So I think they empathize with the general perspective of we live in an unfair country. There is a lot of injustice, inequality. But I think that in the spectrum, they were even if the left-wing spectrum, if FARC was here, they will be like something like here. At least in their own perception. Because the times too, you know, maybe my dad in the 70s, he felt closer, but the more time passed, the more the conflict get bloodier, more drug trafficking and other dynamics were involved. He was more, going further to more like the social democracy, right. This kind of politics.
If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. At Pax Politica, we tell stories throughout the world of peacebuilding and human rights that aren't covered by mainstream media. And every bit of support from you would help us do exactly that. So hit that like button and share the video with your friends and colleagues. We'll see you next time, and thanks for watching. See you in the next one.